The village. In a small village surrounded by dense forests, the villagers lived simple but contented lives. They worked hard, loved deeply, and cherished the land that provided for them. The village was vibrant with colorful houses, gardens full of blooming flowers, and children playing in the streets. However, there was one place that everyone avoided: the dark forest that bordered the village. At the heart of that forest stood an ancient, crumbling tower, where a mysterious old witch was said to reside. The witch's garden. The villagers believed that the witch had a garden full of enchanted plants that could cast spells, cure any ailment, or create powerful potions. But no one dared to enter the garden or the forest for fear of the witch's wrath. It was said that she had lived there for centuries, casting spells and making potions that brought both miracles and curses to those who dared cross her path. The village children grew up hearing tales of her wickedness, told to keep them from wandering into the forest. Elara's curiosity. Elara, a young girl in the village, was different from the other children. She was curious, brave, and always asking questions about the world. She loved reading about plants, animals, and the stars. And she dreamed of one day becoming a healer who could help others. Elara had heard the stories about the witch, but instead of feeling scared, she felt a strong desire to learn more. She wondered what secrets the witch's garden held and whether the witch was truly as evil as everyone said. One day, while wandering near the edge of the forest, Elara saw a small, glowing flower that she had never seen before. It was beautiful, with petals that shimmered in the sunlight. She knew it must have come from the witch's garden. Without thinking, Elara picked the flower and tucked it into her pocket. Little did she know, this small act would lead her on a journey that would change her life forever. The mysterious flower. Elara couldn't stop thinking about the strange, glowing flower she had found. She decided to ask her grandmother, a wise woman known for her knowledge of plants and herbs, about it. "Grandmother, have you ever seen a flower like this?" Elara asked as she placed the glowing flower on the table. Her grandmother's eyes widened in surprise. "Where did you find this, Elara?" she asked, her voice a mixture of wonder and concern. "Near the edge of the forest," Elara replied, careful not to mention that she suspected it was from the witch's garden. Her grandmother gently picked up the flower and examined it closely. "This is no ordinary flower, child. It's a moonshade blossom, a rare plant that only grows in places touched by powerful magic. They say can heal the gravest wounds, but it can also be dangerous if not handled properly." Elara listened intently, her curiosity growing. "Dangerous? How?" "The moonshade blossom can amplify emotions both good and bad. In the hands of someone with a pure heart, it can perform miracles. But in the hands of someone with ill intentions, it can cause great harm." Elara thought for a moment. "Do you think the witch uses these flowers in her potions?" Her grandmother looked at her sharply. "Elara, stay away from that forest and the witch. There's no telling what might happen if you get too close." But Elara couldn't ignore the pull she felt. She needed to know more. The decision. That night, as Elara lay in bed, she couldn't sleep. The moonshade blossom seemed to glow even brighter in the dark, casting a soft light across her room. She felt an inexplicable connection to the flower and the mysterious garden it had come from. "I have to see it for myself," Elara whispered to herself. "I have to know the truth about the witch and her garden." The next morning, Elara packed a small bag with supplies: some bread, a flask of water, and a few herbs her grandmother had taught her to use for protection. She slipped the moonshade blossom into her pocket and set off for the forest. As she approached the edge of the forest, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear. The trees loomed tall and dark, their branches intertwining to create a canopy that blocked out the sun. The air was thick with the scent of moss and damp earth. Taking a deep breath, Elara stepped into the forest, her heart pounding in her chest. The enchanted forest. The moment Elara entered the forest, she felt as if she had stepped into another world. The air was cooler, and the sounds of the village faded away, replaced by the soft rustling of leaves and the distant calls of unseen creatures. As she walked deeper into the forest, she noticed strange plants and flowers growing along the path. Some glowed softly, like the moonshade blossom, while others emitted a faint hum or shimmered with a rainbow of colors. Elara had never seen anything like it. She paused to examine a cluster of blue mushrooms that seemed to pulse with light. As she reached out to touch one, a small voice piped up from the ground. "Careful, little one. Those mushrooms are not for picking." Elara jumped back in surprise and looked around. Standing before her was a tiny creature, no taller than her knee, with bright green skin, large eyes, and a pair of delicate wings that shimmered like a dragonfly's. "Who are you?" Elara asked, her heart racing. "I'm Sprig, a forest sprite," the creature replied with a grin. "And you're a brave little human to venture into this part of the forest. Most of your kind stay far away." "I'm looking for the witch's garden," Elara said, deciding to be honest. "Do you know where it is?" Sprig's eyes widened. "The witch's garden. I found a flower near the forest's edge," Elara explained, showing Sprig the moonshade blossom. "I think it came from her garden, and I want to learn more about it." Sprig eyed the flower curiously. "You're not like other humans, are you?" "Most would be too scared to even think about going near the witch." Elara shrugged. "I guess I'm just curious." "Well, I can show you the way. But be warned, the witch is powerful and not always kind to those who trespass. But if you're determined, follow me." With that, Sprig darted off into the forest, and Elara hurried to keep up, her heart pounding with anticipation and a touch of fear. The Garden of Wonders. After what felt like hours of navigating through the dense forest, Sprig led Elara to a small clearing. There, nestled between towering trees, was a high stone wall covered in ivy and glowing moss. The wall seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions, and at its center was an old, weathered gate. "This is the entrance to the witch's garden," Sprig said, hovering beside Elara. "Are you sure you want to go in?" Elara nodded, her resolve firm. "I need to see it for myself." Sprig gave a small nod of approval and, with a flick of his wings, the gate creaked open, revealing a pathway lined with more glowing plants. Elara took a deep breath and stepped through the gate. The garden was unlike anything Elara had ever seen. It was both beautiful and eerie, filled with plants that seemed to defy the natural order. Trees with golden leaves stood beside bushes that bore fruit shaped like stars. Flowers of every color imaginable bloomed in clusters, their petals shifting and changing like the patterns in a kaleidoscope. In the center of the garden stood a massive tree with silver bark and branches that twisted upwards like spirals. At its base was a small pond with water as clear as glass, reflecting the sky above. As Elara walked deeper into the garden, she felt a sense of awe and wonder, but also a strange unease. It was as if the garden was alive, watching her every move. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the garden, soft but commanding. "Who dares enter my garden without permission?" Elara froze, her heart racing. She turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows, an old woman with long, silver hair and piercing green eyes. She wore a robe made of dark, flowing fabric that seemed to blend with the shadows around her. The witch's challenge. The witch approached Elara with a stern expression, her eyes narrowing as she looked the girl up and down. "You are brave to venture into my domain, child," the witch said. "But bravery alone is not enough to survive here. Why have you come?" Elara swallowed her fear and stood tall. "I found this flower near the forest's edge," she said, holding out the moonshade blossom. "I think it came from your garden, and I wanted to learn more about it." The witch's eyes softened slightly as she examined the flower. "The moonshade blossom is indeed from my garden," she said. "It is a powerful plant, one that few have the knowledge to use properly. Why do you seek its secrets?" Elara hesitated, then spoke from her heart. "I want to learn how to heal people, to help them. I've read about plants and herbs, but I know there's so much more to learn. I thought maybe you could teach me." The witch studied Elara for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "Very well. I will teach you what you seek to learn, but only if you prove yourself worthy." Elara nodded eagerly. "What must I do?" The witch smiled, but it was not a comforting smile. "The garden is filled with tests, each designed to challenge your mind, your heart, and your spirit. If you pass these tests, I will share my knowledge with you. But be warned, fail, and you may never leave this garden." Elara felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to back down. "I accept your challenge." The witch nodded and raised her hand, and the garden seemed to come alive around them. The plants rustled, and the air filled with a strange, humming energy. "Let the first test begin," the witch said, her voice echoing through the garden. "The test of the mind." As the witch's words faded into the air, the garden shifted around Elara, the vibrant colors dulled, and the plants she had admired moments before took on a more ominous tone. The twisting branches of the silver tree loomed over her, and the pathway she had entered on was now hidden beneath dense, thorny vines. Elara took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "Where do I start?" she asked, looking around. The witch's voice echoed through the garden, though the witch herself was nowhere to be seen. "Your first test is of the mind. Use your knowledge and wisdom to find the hidden path that leads deeper into the garden. But beware, this garden is full of illusions." Elara looked around at the garden, now unfamiliar and foreboding. She remembered her grandmother's teachings about plants and their uses. If the garden was filled with illusions, she would need to trust her instincts and the knowledge she had gained. She started by examining the plants around her. Some seemed ordinary, like the bluebell flowers and ivy, but others had an unusual glow or shimmer, suggesting they might be enchanted. She noticed that certain plants seemed to pulse with a faint light when she looked directly at them, while others faded away as if they were mere mirages. Illusions. Elara muttered to herself. The path must be hidden among these plants, disguised by magic. She closed her eyes, trying to focus on what she knew. The moonshade blossom in her pocket felt warm against her hand, and she remembered her grandmother's words. It amplifies emotions and instincts. With this in mind, Elara decided to rely on her instincts. She let her hand hover over the plants, feeling for the one that felt different, the one that resonated with her. As she moved her hand over the plants, she felt a sudden warmth near a patch of ordinary-looking ferns. Cautiously, she pushed the ferns aside and discovered a narrow path hidden beneath them. The moment she uncovered the path, the garden seemed to shift again, and the vibrant colors returned, as if rewarding her success. Elara stepped onto the path, her confidence growing. She had passed the first test, but she knew there were more challenges ahead. The test of the heart. The path led Elara to a clearing, where a large stone pedestal stood in the center. On the pedestal were 3 glass vials, each filled with a different colored liquid red, blue, and green. Beside the vials was a small plaque with an inscription. "To pass this test, you must choose wisely. Only one vial holds the key to the next challenge. The others will lead to despair. Use your heart to guide you." The healing arts. In the days that followed, Elara spent her time learning from the witch. Each morning, she would wake early and follow the witch through the garden, where they would collect herbs, flowers, and other ingredients for the potions and remedies the witch made. The witch taught Elara the names of each plant, their properties, and how to use them in various ways. Some were for healing, while others were for protection or enhancing one's senses. Elara was fascinated by the depth of knowledge the witch possessed, and how everything in the garden was connected. One day, the witch showed Elara how to make a healing salve from the leaves of the silverwood tree, the same tree that stood at the center of the garden. The salve could heal cuts and burns almost instantly, but it required careful preparation and a pure heart to use effectively. As Elara mixed the ingredients under the witch's guidance, she felt a deep sense of purpose. She was no longer just curious, was dedicated to learning everything she could so that she could help others. When the salve was ready, the witch had 𝐿ara test it on a small cut on her hand. As she applied the salve, the wound closed up within moments, leaving no trace behind. 𝐿ara marveled at the power of the salve. "It's incredible," she said, looking at her healed hand. The witch nodded. "The garden's magic is strong, but remember, it is only as strong as the intentions of the one who uses it. Always use your knowledge for good, and the garden will continue to provide for you." 𝐿ara took the witch's words to heart, vowing to use what she learned to help those in need. The witch's story. As the days turned into weeks, 𝐿ara grew closer to the witch. She began to see past the old woman's stern exterior and recognize the kindness and wisdom within her. The witch, in turn, seemed to warm to 𝐿ara, sharing more of her past and the reasons she had chosen a life of solitude in the enchanted garden. One evening, as the sun set and bathed the garden in a golden light, 𝐿ara and the witch sat together beneath the silverwood tree. The witch had just finished teaching 𝐿ara how to brew a calming tea from the petals of the whispering rose, a flower that only bloomed at dusk. 𝐿ara, feeling comfortable in the witch's presence, gathered the courage to ask something that had been on her mind for a while. "Why do you live alone in this garden, witch? The villagers say you've been here for centuries, but they don't know why." The witch was silent for a moment, her eyes gazing into the distance. Then, with a sigh, she began to speak. "I wasn't always alone, child," the witch said, her voice tinged with sadness. "Long ago, I lived in a village much like yours." Suddenly, the darkness shifted, and 𝐿ara found herself standing in her village. But something was wrong. The village was silent and empty, the houses dark and the gardens overgrown. It was as if everyone had vanished, leaving the village to decay. 𝐿ara's heart sank as she walked through the deserted streets. She had always feared losing her home, her family, and everything she loved. The scene before her was a manifestation of that fear, and it felt all too real. But as she continued to walk, she noticed something strange. The moonshade blossom in her pocket began to glow, casting a soft light around her. The darkness seemed to recede, and with it, the eerie silence. 𝐿ara realized that this vision was not real, it was an illusion, created by her own fears. She had the power to dispel it, to bring light back into the darkness. With that realization, 𝐿ara held the glowing flower aloft, and the light grew brighter, driving away the shadows. The village around her began to change, the houses lighting up and the gardens blooming once more. The air filled with the sounds of laughter and life, and 𝐿ara felt a wave of relief wash over her. The scene faded, and 𝐿ara found herself back in the hollow of the tree. But this time, she was not afraid. She had faced her deepest fear and overcome it, proving the strength of her spirit. As she stepped out of the hollow, the garden greeted her with a vibrant display of colors and sounds. The witch appeared before her, a look of approval in her eyes. "You have passed the tests, 𝐿ara," the witch said, her voice no longer harsh but gentle. "You have proven your mind, heart, and spirit are strong. You are worthy of the knowledge you seek." 𝐿ara felt a surge of pride and gratitude. "Thank you, witch. I'm ready to learn." The witch smiled and placed a hand on 𝐿ara's shoulder. "Then come with me, and I will teach you the secrets of the garden, the healing arts." In the days that followed, 𝐿ara spent her time learning from the witch. Each morning, she would wake early and follow the witch through the garden, where they would collect herbs, flowers, and other ingredients for the potions and remedies the witch made. The witch taught 𝐿ara the names of each plant, their properties, and how to use them in various ways. Some were for healing, while others were for protection or enhancing one's senses. 𝐿ara was fascinated by the depth of knowledge the witch possessed, and how everything in the garden was connected. One day, the witch showed 𝐿ara how to make a healing salve from the leaves of the silverwood tree, the same tree that stood at the center of the garden. The salve could heal cuts and burns almost instantly, but it required careful preparation and a pure heart to use effectively. As Alara mixed the ingredients under the witch's guidance, she felt a deep sense of purpose. She was no longer just curious, she was dedicated to learning everything she could, so that she could help others. When the salve was ready, the witch had Alara test it on a small cut on her hand. As she applied the salve, the wound closed up within moments, leaving no trace behind. Alara marveled at the power of the salve. "It's incredible," she said, looking at her healed hand. The witch nodded. "The garden's magic is strong, but remember, it is only as strong as the intentions of the one who uses it. Always use your knowledge for good, and the garden will continue to provide for you." Alara took the witch's words to heart, vowing to use what she learned to help those in need. The witch's story. As the days turned into weeks, Alara grew closer to the witch. She began to see past the old woman's stern exterior and recognize the kindness and wisdom within her. The witch, in turn, seemed to warm to Alara, sharing more of her past and the reasons she had chosen a life of solitude in the enchanted garden. One evening, as the sun set and bathed the garden in a golden light, Alara and the witch sat together beneath the silverwood tree. The witch had just finished teaching Alara how to brew a calming tea from the petals of the whispering rose, a flower that only bloomed at dusk. Alara, feeling comfortable in the witch's presence, gathered the courage to ask something that had been on her mind for a while. "Why do you live alone in this garden, witch? The villagers say you've been here for centuries, but they don't know why." The witch was silent for a moment, her eyes gazing into the distance. Then, with a sigh, she began to speak. "I wasn't always alone, child," the witch said, her voice tinged with sadness. "Long ago, I lived in a village much like yours. I was a healer, known for my knowledge of plants and potions. People would come to me from all over, seeking cures for their ailments." Alara listened intently, sensing that this was a story the witch had rarely shared. But one day, the witch continued, "A great illness swept through the land. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find a cure. The villagers became desperate, and in their fear, they turned against me, blaming me for the sickness. They accused me of witchcraft and cast me out, forcing me to flee into the forest." The witch's voice grew heavy with emotion. "I wandered for days, lost and alone, until I stumbled upon this garden. It was hidden from the world, a place of great magic and power. The garden welcomed me, sensing my pain and my need for refuge. I decided to stay here, away from the world that had rejected me." Alara's heart ached for the witch. "I'm so sorry that happened to you," she said softly. "But why did you choose to remain hidden? The villagers could have benefited from your knowledge." The witch smiled sadly. "Over time, I realized that the world outside was not ready for the kind of magic this garden holds. People fear what they do not understand, and fear can lead to terrible actions. So I chose to live in solitude, guarding the secrets of the garden and using its magic only when necessary." Alara thought about the stories she had heard as a child. The tales of the wicked witch in the forest. How different the truth was from those tales. "But you're not evil," Alara said, almost to herself. "You're just misunderstood." The witch looked at Alara, her eyes softening. "Perhaps, but that is why I've been cautious about who I allow into the garden. Most who seek its magic do so for selfish reasons, and the garden's power can corrupt those with impure hearts. But you, Alara, have proven yourself different. You came not out of greed, but out of a genuine desire to learn and help others." Alara felt a warmth in her chest at the witch's words. "I'm grateful that you've trusted me with your knowledge," she said sincerely. "I want to make sure that the good I do with it honors everything you've taught me." The witch smiled, a rare but genuine expression. "That is all I could ask for. You remind me of myself when I was young, eager to learn, and full of hope. But remember, child, that with great knowledge comes great responsibility. You must be mindful of how you use the power you've gained." Alara nodded, understanding the gravity of the witch's advice. "I will." A gift of farewell. As the weeks passed, Elara's time in the garden began to draw to a close. She had learned much from the witch and had grown in ways she hadn't anticipated. But she knew she couldn't stay forever. Her village, her family, and the people she hoped to help were waiting for her. On the last day of her stay, the witch called Elara to the silverwood tree. "There is one final thing I must give you before you leave," the witch said, her tone solemn. From within the folds of her robe, the witch produced a small, intricately carved wooden box. She handed it to Elara, who opened it to find 3 delicate vials of potion, each a different color: red, blue, and green, just like the ones she had encountered during the test of the heart. These potions represent the wisdom, compassion, and courage you've shown during your time here, the witch explained. The red vial will give you strength in moments of physical or emotional weakness. The blue vial will help you see the truth when it is hidden. And the green vial will heal those who are gravely ill or wounded. Use them wisely. Elara looked at the vials, overwhelmed by the gift and the trust the witch was placing in her. "Thank you, witch," she said, her voice full of emotion. "I'll use them only when they're truly needed." The witch nodded. "I know you will, Elara, and remember, the garden will always be here if you ever need to return. The knowledge you've gained is not just in your mind, but in your heart. Trust in it, and you will find your way." With those final words, the witch led Elara to the edge of the garden. As they reached the gate, Elara turned to look back at the beautiful, mysterious place that had become like a second home to her. "I'll never forget you or the garden," Elara said, her eyes shining with gratitude. The witch gave her a gentle smile. "And I will never forget the girl who came to my garden with an open heart and left with the wisdom of the ages. Go now, Elara. The world needs people like you." With a final, lingering glance, Elara stepped through the gate and into the forest beyond. As she walked away, the gate slowly closed behind her, and the garden, with all its wonders, faded from view. The return home, the homecoming. Elara made her way back through the forest, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and anticipation. The forest, which had once seemed so dark and mysterious, now felt almost welcoming. The path that had been so difficult to navigate before was now clear and easy, as if the forest itself was guiding her home. As she emerged from the trees and saw her village in the distance, Elara felt a swell of emotion. She had been gone for weeks, but it felt like a lifetime. She had changed in so many ways, and she wondered how her family and the villagers would react to the new her. When she reached the edge of the village, she was greeted by the sight of familiar faces: her parents, her grandmother, and some of the villagers who had noticed her approach. They rushed to meet her, their expressions a mix of relief and joy. "Elara, you're back," her mother cried, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We were so worried about you," her father added, his voice thick with emotion. "Where have you been?" Elara smiled, feeling a sense of warmth and belonging she hadn't realized she had missed. "I've been learning," she said simply. "I met someone who taught me a lot about healing and the power of nature. I want to use what I've learned to help the village." Her grandmother, who had always been wise to the ways of the world, looked at Elara with a knowing smile. "You've been to the witch's garden, haven't you?" Elara nodded, surprised, but not shocked that her grandmother had guessed. "Yes, I have. She's not what the stories say, grandmother. She's kind and wise, and she's taught me so much." Her grandmother nodded, her eyes twinkling with understanding. "I always suspected there was more to those stories. I'm glad you found her, Elara, and I'm even more glad that you've returned home safe and sound." The villagers, who had gathered around, listened with wide eyes as Elara shared a few details of her journey, leaving out some of the more magical elements. They were amazed at the knowledge she had gained and were eager to see how she could help the village with her new skills. The healer of the village, In the weeks that followed, 𝐬𝐿ARA began to put her newfound knowledge to use. She worked alongside her grandmother, tending to the sick and injured, using the potions and remedies she had learned to create in the witch's garden. The villagers marveled at her abilities, and word spread quickly that 𝐿𝐿ARA was a healer unlike any they had known before. 𝐿𝐿ARA's days were busy, but she found great joy in her work. She was able to heal wounds that once would have taken weeks to mend, soothe pain with just a touch, and even bring comfort to those suffering from ailments that had plagued them for years. The villagers came to trust her implicitly, knowing that 𝐿𝐿ARA's heart was as pure as her intentions. One day, a young boy was brought to 𝐿𝐿ARA's door, gravely ill and barely clinging to life. His mother was frantic, having tried everything she knew to save him. 𝐿𝐿ARA, too, felt the weight of the situation, knowing that this was one of the moments the witch had warned her about. With a steady hand, 𝐿𝐿ARA took out the green vial, the one meant for healing the gravest of injuries or illnesses. She administered the potion carefully, praying that it would be enough. As the liquid touched the boy's lips, a warm, golden light spread through his body, and 𝐿𝐿ARA knew that the magic was working. Within hours, the boy's fever broke, and his strength began to return. His mother wept with relief and gratitude, thanking 𝐿𝐿ARA over and over again. From that day on, 𝐿𝐿ARA's reputation as a healer spread far and wide. People came from distant villages seeking her help, and 𝐿𝐿ARA, remembering the witch's teachings, treated each person with the same care and compassion. But despite her growing fame, 𝐿𝐿ARA never forgot the lessons she had learned in the garden. She remained humble, always mindful of the responsibility that came with her knowledge and power. She knew that the garden's magic was not hers to own, but a gift to be shared wisely. The legacy of the garden. Years passed, and 𝐿𝐿ARA continued to serve her village as its healer. She grew into a wise and respected woman, much like her grandmother before her. People would often come to her not just for healing, but for advice and guidance, knowing that 𝐿𝐿ARA had a deep understanding of the world and its mysteries. As time went on, 𝐿𝐿ARA began to teach others what she had learned, passing on the knowledge of the garden to those she trusted. She knew that one day she would no longer be able to tend to everyone who needed help, and it was important that the wisdom of the garden lived on. She never returned to the witch's garden, but she often thought of it with fondness. In quiet moments, she would take out the small wooden box the witch had given her and look at the vials, now nearly empty. They were a reminder of the journey she had taken and the lessons she had learned. And though she never saw the witch again, 𝐿𝐿ARA knew that she was never far away. The garden, with all its wonders and secrets, was always there, hidden in the depths of the forest, waiting for those who were worthy to find it.